The wind had changed that morning, curling through the vast halls of Chicago's Greyhound bus terminal like it had something to whisper. Dust motes danced in pale sunlight that slanted through the grimy windows as Marcus, the janitor, bent to clean behind a row of unused lockers scheduled for removal. The station was getting a facelift after nearly 2 decades of grime, crime, and forgotten stories. His broom caught on something rigid beneath the base of locker 319. Frowning, Marcus knelt and reached into the narrow gap between metal and floor. His fingers brushed leather. He pulled, tugging free a worn brown wallet, brittle at the edges, its surface etched with age and time. He opened it casually, expecting expired bus passes or old receipts. Instead, he found an ID. Michael Carraway. Date of birth, 1979. Address, Minneapolis, Minnesota. The face on the license was young, alert, cautious. The edges of the card were stuck with filth, but the name leapt out like a shout in a quiet room. Marcus blinked. That name, he'd heard it before. A missing person, maybe. Something about 2007. Curious, he set the wallet aside and continued working, but the name clung to his mind like gum to a shoe. On his lunch break, he pulled out his phone and searched. The headline appeared almost instantly. Man vanishes from Chicago Greyhound Station, August 2007. It was him. Michael Carraway had vanished without a trace 17 years ago. One moment alive and waiting for a bus, the next, gone. No luggage recovered, no credit card use, no contact with friends or family. His case had gone cold within months, buried under newer headlines and more urgent disappearances. And now, his wallet had resurfaced under a locker that hadn't been moved since 2005. Something wasn't right. That same evening, the discovery made its way to a local police station. The officer on duty, disinterested and overworked, logged the wallet and filed it into evidence. But someone else saw the report. Her name was Sarah Lanes, freelance investigative reporter, former journalist at the Tribune, now hunting stories no one else had time to chase. She'd written about forgotten crimes, abandoned towns, stolen identities. This was a puzzle, one worth solving. Before we go deeper into this unraveling mystery, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This story is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Sarah stared at the screen, reading and rereading the short article about the wallet's recovery. Her eyes lingered on Michael's photo. There was something about the way he looked at the camera, a sadness maybe, or a secret. She clicked through archived files, dusting off digital cobwebs. The Carraway disappearance had barely made the evening news in 2007. No known enemies, no history of mental illness. Witnesses claimed he was seen pacing near the terminal entrance, checking his watch, talking briefly on a payphone. After that, nothing. And now this relic had surfaced. Sarah's instincts burned. The station itself was an aging behemoth, built in 1953, remodeled in the 80s, and slowly rotting ever since. A place of constant motion, but rarely of attention. Nobody lingered at Greyhound stations unless they had to. Cameras in 2007 were unreliable at best, and the terminal's internal logs had long since been corrupted or lost. But physical evidence, that couldn't be denied. Sarah reached out to the Chicago PD, requesting access to the wallet. She didn't expect much, just a glance, maybe a copy of its contents. To her surprise, she was told that it hadn't been fully processed yet. If she arrived quickly, they might let her take a look before it vanished into the bureaucratic void. She grabbed her coat. In the evidence room, under flickering lights and the weight of old crimes, Sarah held the wallet in gloved hands. The leather was cracked, the stitching frayed, but the presence of it felt intimate, like touching a ghost. Inside were a few bills, faded receipts, a train stub and the ID, and something else. Behind the paper lining of one flap, just barely visible, was the corner of a folded note. She looked up at the officer. "Mind if I take a closer look?" August 19th, 2007. The sun beat down mercilessly on the steaming pavement outside the Greyhound bus terminal in downtown Chicago. Inside, the air was thick with the mingled scents of fast food, exhaust, and sweat. Travelers drifted in and out, some with purpose, others with weary aimlessness. Among them stood Michael Carraway. He was 28, tall but not imposing, dressed in jeans and a navy jacket despite the summer heat. His dark hair was slightly unkempt, as if he'd run his hands through it too many times. Slung over his shoulder was a green duffel bag. In his right hand he clutched a white envelope, unmarked, sealed, creased at the edges. He stood apart, as if unsure where to go next. Michael had left Minneapolis that morning. He'd told his sister, Anna, he was meeting someone important. Not a friend, not family, he hadn't shared a name. "I just have to deliver something," he'd said, trying to sound casual. But his voice had cracked just slightly. Anna had noticed. She always noticed. Now, here he was, eyes scanning the crowd, waiting. A digital board above him flashed arrivals and departures. Buses came and went. The crowd shifted constantly. Still, Michael stayed rooted, checking his watch every few minutes. 2:37 p.m., then 2:52, then 3:10. He walked to a payphone, fed in some coins, and dialed a number from memory. He listened. 1 ring, 2, 4, voicemail. He hung up, waited, dialed again. Still nothing. He turned, walking slowly toward the food court, but paused beside a pillar. A man brushed past him, heavy-set, shaved head, grey sweatshirt. Michael flinched. The envelope was now inside his jacket, zipped up tight. He turned and walked in the opposite direction. At 3:41 p.m., a camera above Gate 7 caught his final image. Michael standing near a vending machine, speaking to someone off-frame. His expression was tense, lips tight, shoulders squared. That image was the last official record of him. The investigation started the next morning, when Anna reported her brother missing. She hadn't heard from him since his text the previous afternoon. "Made it to Chicago, I'll call you after." The call never came. She contacted local authorities, filed a report, made dozens of calls. Days passed, then weeks. Surveillance footage was reviewed, statements collected, phone records analyzed. The leads were meager. One bus driver recalled seeing Michael on the concourse, but didn't remember him boarding any vehicle. A coffee vendor said Michael looked nervous and bought a black coffee around 3 p.m. No one else could say much more. His phone had last pinged near the terminal. Then silence. Police found no signs of foul play, no blood, no abandoned belongings, no indication of struggle. The duffel bag, the envelope, even his wallet were gone. It was as if the floor had opened and swallowed him whole. Anna was relentless. She hired a private investigator, posted flyers across the city, reached out to the media. But coverage faded, interest waned, and Michael's face became just another missing poster, curling at the corners in the wind. Over time, questions hardened into grief. Why hadn't he told her more? Who was he meeting? What was in that envelope? Why was he so scared? Michael wasn't the type to vanish. He was a planner, quiet, thoughtful, a data analyst for a mid-sized firm in Minneapolis, reliable, honest. His co-workers described him as meticulous. Not a drinker, not a risk-taker, not the type to run off without a word. But something had shifted in him during those final months. He'd become distracted, guarded. Anna remembered the last time they had lunch together. He barely touched his sandwich, kept glancing at the door. He'd smiled when she pressed him, but it didn't reach his eyes. Now, 17 years later, all of it rushed back. The way he'd held the envelope, the way his voice had trembled, the way he'd said goodbye. The discovery of his wallet reopened everything, and somewhere deep in the fabric of that old terminal, the truth still waited. Anna Carraway sat alone at her kitchen table, the morning sun catching the dust on the window pane. The email had arrived the night before, short, sterile, factual. A wallet belonging to her brother Michael had been recovered at the Chicago Greyhound station. No further information was provided, no explanations, just a link to a contact at the Chicago PD. She hadn't spoken to anyone about Michael in years. For a long time, his name had been a wound too raw to touch. At first, she'd kept his room exactly as he left it, the stack of worn sci-fi paperbacks, the model train still perched on the shelf. But as the years passed, memory turned brittle. Grief transformed into routine, and the search, once relentless, faded into silence. Now suddenly, 17 years later, a stranger held her brother's wallet. It was as if someone had cracked open a sealed tomb and let the ghosts out. Anna called the number. The officer on the line was polite but vague. The wallet had been found during a renovation sweep. No new evidence had yet surfaced. She asked to see it. She was told a reporter had already made an inquiry. That caught her attention. She leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. Why now? Why was this coming back? Anna's thoughts spiraled back to the day Michael disappeared. She'd known something was wrong even before he left Minneapolis. His voice had held an edge, not panic, but pressure, like someone carrying too much weight. He wouldn't tell her who he was meeting, just that it was important and nothing to worry about. She worried anyway. Michael had always been the quiet one, the thoughtful one. Their parents died when they were still teenagers, and it was Michael who kept things steady. He got a job straight out of college, paid bills on time, made careful decisions. He wasn't reckless, so when he vanished it shattered something in her. Not just the fear, but the betrayal of it. How could someone so grounded simply disappear? She'd done everything she could. Flyers, phone calls, late nights scrolling message boards, emailing strangers. She paid a private investigator half her savings for 6 months of dead ends. After a year, the official word was unresolved, and people moved on. Friends stopped asking. Colleagues avoided the subject. The years piled up, but Anna never really stopped waiting. She just got better at pretending not to, until now. The news of the wallet had cracked her shell wide open. She found herself pacing, fingers twitching, as if 17 years hadn't passed at all. She opened an old drawer and pulled out the thin case file she kept, the missing persons report, printed emails, Michael's last text. She looked at his photo. That same face had been in her dreams for years. Sometimes he was standing on a train platform. Sometimes he was on the other side of a glass window, waving but never speaking. She always woke up crying. Now someone else was looking for him, a reporter apparently. That bothered her more than she expected. What would they dig up? What would they say? She picked up the phone again and called the officer back. "I want to speak to whoever found the wallet," she said, "and I want to meet the reporter asking questions." The officer hesitated. "We can pass along your request." "That's not good enough," Anna said, her voice firm. "That's my brother." She hung up and stared at the file again. Her fingers brushed across the grainy photocopy of his driver's license, nearly identical to the one just recovered. The same solemn eyes, the same thin smile. For the first time in years, Anna felt a shift inside her, a pulse of something electric, not hope, that was too fragile, too cruel, but focus. She had buried Michael's story because no one else cared to listen. But if someone had found that wallet, someone had to care now. She stood and walked into the next room where Michael's old things still lived in boxes. She pulled down one labeled Chicago. It held maps, notes, and the few scraps of research she had managed back then. She never could let it go completely. Anna Carraway didn't know what she would find. But this time, if someone was reopening the story, she wouldn't sit quietly. Sarah Lane stood outside the Greyhound terminal, watching the slow churn of people slipping through its weathered doors. The building loomed like a sleeping beast, too familiar to be feared, too old to be trusted. She had been here before, not in body but in stories. Greyhound stations were crossroads for the forgotten, places where people vanished with the same ease they arrived. Inside, she walked past buzzing vending machines and flickering overhead lights. The air smelled of bleach and stale coffee. She approached the front desk and flashed her press card, using an old tactic. Speak quickly, act like you belong. She asked for maintenance records from 2007. The clerk gave her a look that said, "You've got to be kidding." So she tried another route. She found the janitorial supervisor, a gruff man named Leon, who had worked there since the early 2000s. When she mentioned Michael Carraway's name, his face didn't change, but something tightened around his mouth. "You were here in '07, she asked. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Still working the night shift back then?" "Do you remember anything about that night?" He shrugged. "A guy disappears here every couple years. Most come back. That one didn't. Sarah waited. Leon rubbed the back of his neck. Look, it was a weird night. I remember there was some kind of scuffle by the west stairwell. Security showed up. Never found out what it was about. Lotta shouting. One of the guards said it was just some junkies fighting. Do you remember the guard's name? Freddie Kroll. Retired, I think. Big guy. Used to wear sunglasses indoors like he thought he was in a movie. Sarah jotted it down. That was something. She thanked Leon and turned toward the terminal's lower levels. The west stairwell had been mostly blocked off due to renovations, but she managed to get close enough to see where the plaster had cracked along the base. Marks on the wall, faded but unmistakable, suggested someone had slammed into it hard. She snapped a photo. Her next stop was the station's records office. Most of the surveillance footage from 2007 had been digitized, but storage had been a mess during the transition. She asked to review the tapes from August 19, 2007. The clerk on duty sighed. Those were archived years ago, not sure what still exists. He led her to a back room filled with aging equipment and dusty hard drives. After an hour of searching, she found the folder labeled AUG 2007 CAM GT7. It was corrupted, unreadable. Of course it was. She leaned back, frustrated. But there were other angles. She began calling through old station employees, working through names on shift logs. Most were dead ends. But then she reached Freddie Kroll. His voice was scratchy, worn from years and too many cigarettes. When she mentioned Michael, he paused. I remember him, Freddie said. Guy looked scared, nervous. I thought he was being followed. By who? Freddie hesitated. I don't know. Couple of guys in suits. Not the usual types we see here. They stood out. Did you report it? Hell no, wasn't my business. I just made sure there wasn't going to be a fight. Sarah pressed further, but Freddie grew cagey. Look, I don't know what happened. 1 minute he's pacing by the vending machines, next he's gone. Nobody ever came looking with real questions. Not until now. That was telling. Sarah scribbled the last of her notes, thanked him, and hung up. She stepped outside into the late afternoon glare, her mind buzzing. Michael had looked afraid. He might have been followed. There was a scuffle. And now a wallet, perfectly preserved, had shown up in a place where it shouldn't have survived this long. Too many coincidences. She returned to her apartment and laid everything out. The missing person file, the notes from Anna's emails, the map of the terminal. A shape was starting to form beneath the fragments, not yet a picture, but a shadow. Someone knew more than they had said. Sarah didn't believe in random chance, and she didn't believe in clean disappearances. If Michael had been scared, someone had made him that way. And whatever he carried that day, whatever was inside that envelope, it might still matter. Sarah returned to her office with the wallet still in her mind, the weight of it pressing on every other thought. The cracked leather, the faded ID, those had been expected. But the note hidden behind the lining had not. She unfolded it carefully, the paper brittle and yellowed. The handwriting was rushed, slanted, but clear enough to read, If I don't make it, tell L. No name, no address, just a single initial, L. She sat back in her chair, the slip of paper resting on her lap. It didn't feel like a goodbye. It felt like a warning. Who was L? A friend? A lover? Someone who could explain what Michael had been carrying, what he had been so afraid of. Sarah started digging. First, she pulled up phone records from 2007, matching numbers from Michael's cell to any known contacts starting with L. Too broad, too many possibilities. So she narrowed it. Connections in Chicago, people who might have been at or near the terminal. Then she cross-referenced employees. A name appeared. Lana Rios, employed as a part-time service assistant at the Chicago Greyhound terminal from April to October 2007. 23 at the time, lived in a small apartment on the south side. No record since 2008. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. She tracked down an old HR directory. Lana had listed a personal phone number, now disconnected. No social media presence, but a trace of a marriage license from 2011 filed in Indiana. Bingo. She dug deeper and found a current address, a modest home outside South Bend. Sarah made the drive the next morning, the note sealed in a plastic sleeve in her bag, the wallet resting beside her on the passenger seat. She didn't know what she expected: denial, confusion, maybe silence. But when Lana opened the door, her expression changed the moment she saw the photo Sarah held up. Michael's face. Lana's breath caught. "I thought this was over," she said quietly. Sarah nodded once. So did a lot of people. They sat on a worn couch inside, the blinds half drawn against the morning light. Lana was older now, but her eyes held something sharp beneath the years, not fear, but caution. She stared at the wallet, then at the note. "I was afraid this would happen someday," she said, "but I didn't think it actually would." "Did you know him well?" Sarah asked. Lana hesitated. "Not well, but I knew he was in trouble." She spoke slowly, carefully, like each word had been weighed for years. Michael had approached her one evening at the terminal. He was polite, soft-spoken, and clearly nervous. He asked strange questions about surveillance cameras, about unmarked exits, about how often police swept the station. At first, she thought he was just another paranoid traveler, but something about him lingered. He returned the next day and the day after, always alone, always watching. They spoke once more, briefly. He asked her if there were places in the station without cameras. She told him there were a few blind spots behind the utility stairwell, under the main stairway, and near the east side storage corridor. "He didn't tell me why," she said. "He just thanked me, gave me this look, like he was already halfway gone." Sarah leaned in. "And then?" "He asked me if something happened to him, would I tell someone named Anna?" That name hit like a hammer. "He told me his sister's name," Lana whispered. "Said he couldn't risk calling her, that if anything went wrong I'd be the only person who might remember." "Why didn't you come forward?" Sarah asked. Lana's hands trembled. "Because the next day I saw two men come in looking for him. Not police, not customers. They were asking questions, but quiet, like they didn't want to be heard. One of them came back the day after and stared at me for almost 10 minutes without saying a word, just watched me. After that I quit my job and left the city." She paused. "I was scared." Sarah didn't press further. Lana had been a thread in a tapestry long buried, and now that thread was unraveling fast. There was more to Michael's story, and someone had wanted it silenced for a long time. Lana poured herself a glass of water with hands that hadn't stopped shaking. The silence between her and Sarah stretched long and taut, filled with 17 years of weight neither of them fully understood. She sat back down, clutching the glass like a tether. "I never told anyone," she said softly. "Not even my husband." Sarah waited, her notebook forgotten. There was no need for notes here. What Lana was about to say didn't belong on paper just yet. It belonged in the air where truth had room to breathe. "I knew Michael was in danger," Lana continued, "but I didn't know from who. All I knew was that he didn't act like someone just passing through. He was watching everything, everyone." She looked away, and I started watching him. They'd only spoken 3 times. The first was small talk, the second deeper, about blind spots and quiet corners. But the third time something shifted. Michael had pulled her aside, voice low, eyes darting. He told her he was being followed, that something he had, something he'd uncovered, had made him a target. "I asked him if it was drugs or money or something stupid," Lana said. "He laughed, not a real laugh, just a broken little sound." He told her he'd stumbled onto something by accident, that it wasn't his world, but now he was part of it anyway, and he didn't know how to get out. "I begged him to go to the police," she said, "but he said they wouldn't help, that some of them might even be involved." Sarah's heart thudded. "What was he carrying?" she asked. Lana shook her head. "He never showed me. But he said it was proof, documents, names, numbers, something that would blow things wide open if it got into the right hands." "And did he say what it was connected to?" "Transportation contracts, I think. Something about kickbacks, illegal transfers, forged maintenance reports. It didn't make sense to me then, still doesn't. Sarah's mind spun. Greyhound. Government oversight. Private contractors. It was all too big, too vague. But it had shape. And Michael had touched it. There was a group, Lana added. That's what he called it. A group. Not just one person. He said they operated quietly, behind closed doors, using terminals like ours to move money, info, people sometimes. Said it was like a pipeline no one saw. Sarah leaned forward. Did he name anyone? No. Just said if he disappeared it meant they'd found him, and that I should remember his name. Lana looked at her, eyes dark with memory. I did. Every day. Sarah nodded slowly. She felt the chill of it now, the unseen shape behind everything. A man disappears and the world keeps turning. A young woman flees and no one asks why. A wallet resurfaces 17 years later, and suddenly the silence begins to crack. Why did you come back now? Lana asked. Why you? Because someone should have come back sooner, Sarah said. Because the truth deserves light. Lana looked down at her hands. If I help you, if I talk to police, will I be safe? Sarah didn't answer right away. She couldn't promise that. But she did promise this. I'll make sure your story gets told fully, no spin, no edits. If they come for you, they'll have to come through me first. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Lana gave her a long look, then nodded once. She reached into a drawer and pulled out an old notebook, spiral-bound, yellowed, worn from time. Inside were pages of scribbled memories, dates, faces, overheard phrases. She handed it to Sarah. I started writing this after he disappeared, she said. I didn't know if it would ever matter, but maybe it does now. Sarah took it carefully, a new weight added to the one she already carried. She flipped through it. Names, notes, sketches of the terminal's blind spots, timelines. It was a map. Not complete, not perfect, but a beginning. When she left Lana's house, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the quiet street. The notebook rested on the seat beside her, pulsing with potential. There was something buried under Greyhound's concrete and years, and Sarah was going to dig until it screamed. August 19th, 2007. The station was louder than usual, full of summer travelers and the static murmur of announcements echoing from ceiling speakers. Michael Carraway stood near the edge of the food court, sipping lukewarm coffee from a flimsy paper cup, his eyes locked on the entrance. He had already walked the entire terminal twice, scanning faces, checking exits. He didn't like how open the space was. Too many people, too many cameras. But the man he was supposed to meet had insisted. Public location, neutral ground. Michael checked his watch. 2:17 p.m. The envelope in his bag felt heavier by the minute. It was sealed in a plastic sleeve, wrapped in 2 layers of manila pressed flat between old newspapers. The documents inside, copies of emails, spreadsheets, payment orders, signed reports, were more than enough to ruin lives, maybe even end them. He hadn't meant to uncover any of it. It started with a flagged audit, a data anomaly in a transportation contract, then another. The more he dug, the more he found, names that didn't match vendors, payments that didn't match budgets, and a trail that led straight to a network of officials misusing federal infrastructure grants. He should have stopped. He'd tried to report it through proper channels. HR ignored him. His manager asked him to let it go. Then someone tried to break into his apartment. No one stole anything. But his laptop had been touched, files erased, external drives missing. That was when he knew. He turned to a friend, a former classmate who had connections in Chicago. The man agreed to help under one condition: the exchange would be in person. No emails, no texts, no phone calls. Michael agreed. He hadn't slept in 2 days. Every stranger looked like a threat. Every reflection showed a man unraveling, trying to stay calm with his world collapsing. At 2:31 p.m. he made a call from the payphone near Gate 4. No answer. He paced the corridor again, then moved toward the west stairwell, one of the few places Lana had told him didn't have direct camera coverage. He stood there for several minutes, his back against the wall, breathing slowly. The air was cooler there. Still, his shirt clung to his skin. A man in a grey coat passed by. Michael stiffened. He'd seen the man earlier, once by the vending machines, once by the newsstand, never speaking to anyone, always watching. The man paused near the stairwell entrance, pretending to check his phone. But he wasn't texting. He wasn't even looking at the screen. Michael slipped away, retracing his steps toward the food court. He took a seat near the window, his eyes on the reflection in the glass. The man didn't follow, not yet. He needed to think. At 3:03 p.m., he reached for the envelope, as if to reassure himself it was still there. His fingers brushed the edge of it, real, intact, burning like a brand against his ribs. He thought about calling Anna, just to hear her voice. Just to say something in case this went wrong, but he didn't. He couldn't drag her into this. She had a life. He had secrets now. By 3:27 p.m., the man in the grey coat had returned, this time standing at the center of the terminal, surveying the exits like he owned them. Two other men joined him, both dressed in nondescript clothes. One had a duffel bag, the other wore an earpiece. Michael's breath caught. This wasn't paranoia, this was real. He ducked behind a kiosk and moved toward the side exit Lana had mentioned, near the freight hallway, a place without cameras, a place with shadows. He walked quickly, then slower, trying not to draw attention. At 3:38 p.m. he vanished from the station's main view. No one saw him again, not officially. Not until 17 years later, when his wallet emerged from beneath a locker, with only his name and the faint echo of his final message. The hallway beneath the terminal smelled of rust and time. Sarah stepped carefully over a warped section of tile, her flashlight beam cutting through dust and debris. She was back in the Greyhound station, deeper than before, guided by the notes in Lana's journal and a hand-drawn map taped to the inside of Sarah's notebook. The public didn't come down here. Most employees didn't even know this section existed. The old utility stairwell, the freight corridor, they were remnants of a different era, partially sealed during renovations in the 90s. But Lana had remembered them, and more importantly, she'd remembered the story no one had followed up on. An incident report from the night of August 19, 2007, buried in the maintenance logs. A call placed at 3:45 p.m., a man screaming in the utility stairwell. By the time security arrived, no one was there. It hadn't been connected to Michael's case. In fact, it hadn't even been investigated. A single sentence had dismissed it. No disturbance found. But Sarah believed otherwise. She reached the stairwell. The door groaned open under pressure, revealing concrete steps and a cold draft that rose like breath from the past. Graffiti marked the walls. A broken light fixture swung from a loose wire. She moved slowly, counting steps, noting every turn. Halfway down, she stopped. The wall beside her had a smear, not paint, not dirt, something darker. She snapped a photo and continued. At the base of the stairwell, there was a rusted utility door sealed by a padlock, old but intact. She pressed her ear to it. Silence. But something about the air. It carried a faint scent of mold, oil, and something metallic. She didn't try to force it. Not yet. Instead, she returned to the archives room upstairs. She needed leverage. The terminal's administrative office kept logs of all maintenance calls, incident responses, and security memos. Most had been digitized, but a few older binders still sat untouched in metal filing cabinets. Sarah spent hours combing through 2007. What she found was troubling, multiple gaps. Entire days of surveillance footage missing from the drives, including August 18th through 20. A note beside the deletion. System upgrade, file overwrite. But nothing else was scheduled during that period. No tech logs, no vendor signatures. She flipped deeper into the binder. A memo from a station manager dated August 22, 2007, stated that all inquiries regarding the disappearance of individual MC should be redirected to corporate legal. Corporate legal. That was a red flag. Sarah checked property records, looking into ownership of the terminal. At the time of Michael's disappearance, The station had just begun talks with a private security subcontractor, one with ties to a transportation conglomerate based out of Arlington, Virginia. The same company Michael had flagged in his audit notes, Lana's journal confirmed. The connections were thin but present, too consistent to be coincidence. Someone had wanted the stairwell forgotten. And the camera footage gone. Back in her apartment, Sarah spread everything across the table. Floor plans, incident reports, photos of the wall stain, Lana's sketches, the stairwell, the blind spots, the vanished footage. It all pointed to the same place. Whatever happened to Michael didn't happen in the open. It happened below. She called Anna. "I think I found the place," Sarah said. "So where it happened or where it ended?" Anna was quiet on the other end. "Then what do you mean?" "There was a call that day. Screaming. No follow-up. That stairwell hasn't been touched since. It matches everything in Lana's notebook." "Are you saying he died there?" "I'm saying it's possible, but I'm not stopping until I know." Anna didn't respond right away. Then softly, "Then I'm coming to Chicago." Sarah closed her eyes. The weight of the investigation had grown with every answer. The story wasn't just a story anymore. It was a life, stolen, hidden, silenced. And it was pushing its way back into the light. Whatever was buried down there hadn't stayed buried, and Sarah was ready to dig until the silence shattered. The name surfaced like a shadow breaking through fog. Frank Denton. Sarah found it in a statement buried deep within the case file, almost overlooked. A woman who worked in the station food court had mentioned a man loitering near the restrooms around the time of Michael's disappearance. He wasn't aggressive, but he gave her an uneasy feeling. Wore a grey coat, carried a notebook, didn't buy anything. Said he was waiting for someone. She remembered his name because he had muttered it while on the phone. "This is Denton. I see him." The report had been filed, then ignored. Sarah ran the name through databases. Dozens of Frank Dentons across the country, but only one matched the time, location, and description: Franklin J. Denton. Former private investigator. Licensed until 2009. Based out of Cicero, Illinois. Specialty: surveillance, corporate clients, internal investigations. No criminal record, no published complaints. She tracked down his last known address. A low-income senior housing complex on the city's west side. The building's exterior was cracked and weary, its walls stained by weather and age. A receptionist confirmed that Denton still lived there, but warned he didn't talk to many people anymore. "Memory's slipping," she said. "He gets confused." Sarah knocked anyway. The door opened slowly. Frank Denton stood there, thin as a coat rack, grey coat still hanging from his shoulders like a second skin. His eyes were sharp, too sharp for a man supposedly lost in his own mind. "Do I know you?" he asked. "No," Sarah said. "But I think you knew Michael Carraway." The name hit something inside him. He stepped aside. His apartment was a shrine to paper: newspapers, spiral notebooks, filing cabinets. Every flat surface was cluttered. On one wall, pinned with yellowed tape, were photos, maps, names, some crossed out, some circled. Sarah didn't ask questions yet. She let him move at his own pace. Frank sat in a creaking chair. "They told me to forget it," he said. "Told me it wasn't my job to ask questions. But I remember him." "Who told you that?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder, brittle, thick, stained with time. "He hired me first," Frank said. "Michael. Back in July 2007. He thought someone was following him." "Wanted proof," Sarah leaned forward. "He hired you?" Frank nodded. "Didn't tell me much. Just said he'd found something bad, real bad. Gave me a list of names. Asked if I could find out who was watching him." He opened the folder. Inside were photographs, grainy but legible, taken from a distance. Men in suits, cars with tinted windows. One image showed Michael himself, standing outside a federal building, talking on a payphone. "They followed him everywhere," Frank said, "but they were careful, knew the cameras, knew the exits." "Who were they?" Sarah asked. "Government types, or pretending to be. One of them used to work for a contractor out of Arlington. Saw him once at a courthouse with a badge clipped to his belt. Sarah's breath caught. Same company Michael flagged in his audit. Frank smiled grimly. You're starting to see it. He leaned closer. They weren't just stealing money. They were moving things. People. Smuggling data through transport networks. Michael tripped over it. Maybe by accident, maybe not. Either way, they couldn't let him talk. Sarah felt her skin go cold. Why didn't you go to the police? I did, Frank said. Filed a report. Next day, my license got suspended for procedural misconduct. My car got towed. My mailbox got broken into. They made it clear, back off or disappear. So you did. No, he said. I just stopped looking out loud. He motioned toward the wall. I've been watching them ever since. The suits changed, the names changed, but the system didn't. Sarah stood slowly. She felt dizzy, as if the floor had shifted beneath her. She had come looking for a shadow and found the skeleton of a machine. What happened to Michael? She asked. Frank's voice dropped. They caught up with him, I saw it. That day at the station. They surrounded him. I tried to intervene, but I was too late. He disappeared down the stairwell. He paused. And I've been waiting 17 years for someone to come asking. Frank's hands trembled slightly as he slid the folder toward Sarah. Inside were more pages. Old notes, business cards, a grainy photocopy of a corporate ID badge. The name on it read Harlan Bryce, and beneath that the logo of Ameritech Global Logistics. I followed one of them after Michael disappeared, Frank said. This guy, Bryce. He didn't work for Greyhound or any law enforcement agency, but I saw him 3 times inside the terminal that week, always near Michael, never on official logs. Sarah flipped through the pages. Bryce had worked as a compliance officer for Ameritech in 2007. She did a quick search on her phone. No social media, no current address. The company still existed, barely, restructured and renamed after a federal audit in 2008. A knot formed in her stomach. What were they transporting? She asked. Everything, Frank said. They had deals with freight haulers, charter services, even bus depots. And with those contracts came access, unmonitored storage, blind transfers. It wasn't just money laundering. It was data movement, personnel relocation, even contraband at times. And Michael? He traced it back to them. He thought he had proof. He told me that if something happened to him, the files would speak for him. But the envelope was never found. Frank nodded. Which means someone took it, or it's still where he hid it. Sarah thought of the stairwell, the old utility room behind the padlocked door. You said you saw them corner him? I was across the hall, Frank said. He was trying to move fast, kept glancing over his shoulder. They followed, 3 of them, same men I'd seen all week. Michael tried to cut through a side corridor. Then he vanished. Gone. And no one did anything. They didn't need to, he said. No alarm. No struggle loud enough to echo. Just gone. Sarah stared at the name on the ID again. Harlan Bryce. She took a picture of it and uploaded it to a people search engine. After several minutes, a hit came back. Bryce was living in a gated suburb outside Indianapolis. Retired. No public appearances since 2010. No interviews. No photographs newer than his outdated license. She saved the address. Frank leaned back, eyes fixed on the wall of his memories. You really think anyone's going to care after all this time? They will, Sarah said, because I won't let them forget. She returned to her car with the folder clutched to her chest. Pieces were locking into place now, but the frame was still incomplete. Someone had to speak directly. Someone who knew exactly what Michael had found. She reached out to an old source, an ex-federal agent turned whistleblower advocate. They met at a diner off I-90. The man's name was Corbin Wells. Grey suit, no smile. I need to ask about Ameritech, Sarah said. Wells raised an eyebrow. That ghost? I haven't heard that name in years. Then you probably know why someone disappeared in 2007 because of them. Wells grew still. You talking about the bus station thing? Sarah's heart skipped. You know about it? He nodded slowly. There was chatter. A guy vanished. Unconfirmed reports said he had something on a procurement fraud network tied to Ameritech and a few subcontractors. No body. No media traction, too risky to pursue. It went dark. Why? Wells sipped his coffee. Because it wasn't just one company. It was a web, shell firms, private partners, embedded informants. It would have taken years to unwind, and nobody wanted that heat. Sarah showed him the photo of Bryce. He was in it, Wells confirmed. One of the handlers, kept things clean. When things got noisy, he was the one who made them quiet. Sarah leaned in. If I found something now, would it matter? Wells didn't answer for a moment. Then, only if you finish it. Sarah left the diner with her mind racing. Michael hadn't just discovered something dangerous. He'd threatened to expose a system designed to erase people who saw too much. But even systems crack. And cracks become doors. The next step was clear. She had to go back, not to ask, but to find. Whatever Michael had hidden, it had waited long enough. Sarah stood once again at the edge of the stairwell, heart pounding, flashlight in hand. The maintenance crew had granted her temporary access after persistent pressure, along with legal support from her publisher and pressure from the public, thanks to the early stages of her article draft circulating among trusted contacts. The padlock on the utility door had been removed. She took a breath and stepped inside. The air was stale and damp, thick with the scent of forgotten years. Her light swept across rusted pipes, broken shelving, and crates that hadn't been touched in decades. It wasn't much, just a dim chamber used long ago for storage. But this space was key. This was where Michael had disappeared, and maybe where he had hidden the truth. Sarah scanned every surface, her hands brushing along the edges of the walls, testing panels, corners, floor tiles. Dust clung to everything. Then, in the far left corner, her light caught something odd, a loose brick near the base of the wall, misaligned just slightly. She knelt down and pried at it. It shifted. Behind it was a narrow recess, barely wide enough to fit a book. Her fingers slipped inside and pulled. There it was. A faded manila envelope, brittle from time, sealed with 2 strips of yellowed tape. Her breath caught as she opened it. Inside were plastic sleeves, the kind used for archiving documents, and within them, papers that had not seen daylight in 17 years. She took them out slowly, each page revealing a piece of the story. Fraudulent invoices, internal emails referencing untraceable shipments, wire transfer records linking Ameritech executives to private accounts in offshore banks. There were signatures, there were names, and there was one more item, a USB drive labeled MCA, small, silver, untouched. Sarah didn't wait. She left the station and returned to her office, where she connected the drive to a secure laptop. Encrypted folders blinked to life. She entered the password Michael had written on one of the final pages, East 7 319. It worked. The contents were staggering. Hundreds of files, transaction logs, audio recordings. Even surveillance captures. Grainy images of handoffs in terminals, including one at the Chicago Greyhound station. One clip showed Harlan Bryce speaking to an unidentified man with a clipboard, exchanging a thick envelope. And one document, time-stamped just 2 weeks before Michael vanished, outlined a logistics chain for non-itemized transfers involving 8 terminals, 5 cities, and a code name, Mantis Flow. It was everything Michael had hinted at, and more. She backed up the files to 3 separate locations, encrypted them again, and sent a summary to her editor. The newsroom exploded. Legal teams were called. National media outlets expressed immediate interest, and within hours the Department of Transportation launched a review into Ameritech's 2007 contracts, despite the company's rebranding. By morning, federal agents had taken possession of the files. Arrest warrants were drafted. Harlan Bryce, now 73, was taken into custody without incident. 2 other former executives disappeared before subpoenas were delivered. A congressional hearing was proposed. Old names re-emerged. New alliances cracked. Sarah sat back and watched it all unfold with a trembling mix of vindication and sorrow. The truth was out, but it had cost a life. She called Anna that afternoon. We found what he left behind. There was silence on the line, then a breath. Did he know they'd kill him? I think he knew the risk, Sarah said, but he still left it behind for someone to find. Anna's voice broke. He died alone. No, Sarah whispered. He died fighting. For the first time in 17 years, the Carraway case was no longer a question. It was an answer. A man hadn't just vanished. He'd been silenced because he knew too much. But silence had an expiration date, and Michael's had just ended. The news spread like wildfire. Within 48 hours of Sarah's findings becoming public, federal investigators swarmed the Chicago Greyhound terminal. Forensic teams descended on the old stairwell with specialized scanning equipment. Sarah and Anna stood at a distance, watching the silent procession of uniforms and suited agents pass through the same halls Michael had walked 17 years earlier. The investigators worked with precision, guided by Sarah's notes and Lana's map. They focused on the far corner of the utility room where Sarah had recovered the envelope, but it was what lay beneath that drew their attention. Ground-penetrating radar picked up irregularities in the concrete floor. By late afternoon, they had found it, a shallow grave beneath a panel of rotted tile and poured cement. The room fell silent as the crew uncovered human remains wrapped in a deteriorated canvas jacket. Dental records confirmed it within hours. Michael Carraway had never left the terminal. Anna collapsed when she got the call. The moment was both cruel and merciful, closure delivered by a truth far heavier than she had prepared for. She flew to Chicago the next day, and Sarah met her at the airport. Neither woman spoke much during the drive. At the terminal, officials let Anna see the site, now cordoned off and sterile. She stood in silence, eyes fixed on the narrow recess where her brother had been hidden all this time. A single tear traced down her cheek. He had died beneath the feet of thousands, alone, unseen, unheard, and yet not forgotten. Nearby, the investigators recovered more than bones. Buried with the body was a second envelope, water-damaged but still intact, containing Michael's final handwritten letter. It had been written on the back of an old audit form, folded tightly and tucked into the inner pocket of his jacket. It read, "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it, but it also means someone kept looking. To whoever you are, thank you. This story can't die with me. The truth matters, even if it costs everything. My name is Michael Carraway, and I did not vanish. I was silenced, but silence is never forever. Please tell my sister I never stopped trying." The letter was handed to Anna in a sealed evidence bag. She held it like a relic, fingers trembling. She didn't read it immediately. She couldn't. Not yet. That evening, she and Sarah sat in Sarah's apartment, surrounded by papers, boxes, and copies of the files Michael had left behind. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of traffic outside. Sarah made tea. Anna stared at her brother's handwriting. 17 years, she said softly, and he was right here the whole time. Sarah nodded. And he left enough behind to bring it all down. The federal investigation into Ameritech and its network expanded rapidly, with Bryce in custody and 2 whistleblowers stepping forward after years of silence. A full-scale inquiry was underway. Depositions were taken, subpoenas served, corporate partnerships suspended. The Department of Justice confirmed that a multi-agency task force would investigate the broader scope of contract fraud and illicit transport operations linked to the now-defunct shell companies listed in Michael's documents. And in the heart of it all, one man's name appeared again and again, Michael Carraway. The station began to change, too. Renovations were halted. A memorial was proposed. Greyhound's current management, though disconnected from the past leadership, issued a statement acknowledging historic negligence and committing to transparency moving forward. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. Sarah's article went live 3 days later. It was titled, "The Terminal That Swallowed the Truth." Within 24 hours, it had been read by over 4 million people. Networks called, documentaries pitched, awards predicted. But Sarah didn't care about any of that. She cared about the envelope, the voice behind the paper, the man beneath the concrete. Anna, too, found herself caught between grief and something else. something heavier than rage, deeper than sorrow. It was justice, not in the form of revenge, but revelation. Her brother hadn't run. He hadn't broken. He had stood his ground. And now the world finally knew it. The hearings began under fluorescent lights and national scrutiny. A panel of senators sat before long tables stacked with documents, reports, and the now famous envelope. A photograph of Michael Carraway rested on an easel beside the witness stand, his last known image, eyes fixed forward, as if still watching. Sarah sat in the press gallery, notebook in hand. She had front-row access to the unraveling of a system built to hide. Day one brought witnesses from Ameritech's leadership. Their testimonies were clipped, measured, legal teams hissing behind every word. But the evidence was overwhelming. The documents Michael had hidden, financials, memos, directives, had already spoken. Under oath, even the most resistant voices began to crack. A former regional logistics officer confirmed the use of unmonitored storage areas in multiple terminals, including Chicago. A retired procurement coordinator admitted to signing off on bundled invoices that disguised illicit transfers. One by one, denials turned to admissions, and then came the recordings. Michael had secretly captured 2 internal meetings during his time at the Minneapolis office. In one, a manager joked about burying the audit trail under 1,000 pages of miscellaneous freight. In the other, Harlan Bryce himself was heard saying, "No one looks too hard at a bus station. It's noise, transient noise, let it stay that way." That phrase haunted the room. Michael's voice was never heard in those clips. He had stayed silent, just the recorder ticking in his pocket, but his presence lingered in every sentence spoken, every face on the panel. He was the ghost in the foundation, the man who refused to be erased. Anna took the stand on the 3rd day. She read from Michael's letter. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it." The room fell still. She spoke slowly, clearly, not as someone crushed, but as someone resolved. "He didn't just want the truth known," she said. "He wanted it remembered, not for vengeance, but for justice. My brother died trying to stop something. I'm here to make sure it never happens again." Applause wasn't allowed in the chamber. But no one needed to clap. Outside, the public response was massive. Vigils were held in Minneapolis and Chicago. Letters poured into the newsroom to Anna, even to Sarah. People moved by Michael's story, by the silence he had endured, and by the voice he left behind. The Department of Transportation suspended 7 current contracts pending internal review. 2 senior officials resigned. A new federal oversight program was proposed to audit transport-related private partnerships, and Ameritech, now operating under the name Echelon Pathways, saw its stock plummet. But it was more than punishment. It was visibility. For the first time in years, bus terminals weren't just passing points. They were examined, reassessed. The public remembered that transit wasn't just about roads. It was about people. People like Michael. People who disappeared because they saw too much or asked the wrong questions. Sarah's article was expanded into a book, published under the title Terminal Silence: The Story of Michael Carraway. It became a bestseller within weeks. The first chapter was Michael's letter. The final chapter was Anna's testimony. In it, Sarah wrote, "Justice is not only about punishment, it is about acknowledgement. Michael was not a mystery. He was a man who told the truth when no one wanted to hear it. And in doing so, he ensured that the truth would speak even when he no longer could. The truth had come out, and it was spreading. Universities invited Sarah to speak. Advocacy groups honored Michael posthumously with awards for civic courage. A foundation was established in his name to support whistleblowers in the public sector, and at the Chicago Greyhound terminal, renovations resumed, this time with a plaque installed near locker 319. It read, "In memory of Michael Carraway, 1979-2007, he vanished here. His truth did not." Sarah visited the station one final time before the dedication. She stood by the plaque and read the words aloud to herself. Then she turned toward the concourse. People moved past her, travelers, workers, strangers, the same way they had 17 years ago. But something was different now. Someone had finally listened. The memorial was simple. A few chairs set up near the entrance of the Chicago Greyhound station. A folding table with photographs, Michael's name printed on a navy blue banner, a gathering of strangers, journalists, friends, and a few officials who now owed their clarity to one man's long-buried courage. Anna stood near the front. She wore a dark coat despite the warmth, her eyes steady as they scanned the quiet crowd. No fanfare, no microphones, just people, gathered not to grieve but to remember. Lana came. They hadn't seen each other since the investigation, but when their eyes met, neither needed to speak. They shared the same ache, the same memory of a young man who had once stood alone and afraid in a place that swallowed voices. Sarah arrived last. She kept to the edge of the group, her notepad still in hand, though she had no intention of writing anything this time. Today wasn't about more headlines, it was about legacy. After a moment of silence, Anna stepped forward. "I don't have much to say," she began, her voice low but unwavering. "Michael wasn't a hero because he tried to be. He was a hero because he refused to lie. He could have walked away. He could have said nothing, but he didn't." She looked up at the plaque mounted on the brick wall. He believed truth would survive. He didn't live to see it happen. But he was right. There was no applause, just stillness, and then movement, the kind that ripples quietly across a community, through hearts that carry more than words. One by one, the guests stepped forward, laying small tokens by the plaque. Flowers, letters, even old bus tickets. The city hadn't forgotten him. The world wouldn't either. Sarah and Anna walked together afterward. No destination, just steps along the street outside the terminal. Chicago moved around them, alive with sound and motion, but for a little while it felt gentler. "He wrote more than one letter," Anna said quietly. Sarah looked at her. "You have it?" Anna nodded. "I couldn't read it before, not until everything was over." She pulled a folded page from her coat pocket. It was creased, softened by time. Michael's handwriting still clear, she read it aloud. "Anna, I know you told me not to do this, that it was dangerous. You were right. But I couldn't walk away from it. If something happens, I need you to know that it was my choice. I'm sorry for the pain, but not for what I tried to do. Don't let this end with me. And please, don't let them tell you it was meaningless. It wasn't. I love you. Keep going." They stopped walking. Neither said anything for a long time. Eventually, Sarah broke the silence. "He saved more than you know." "I know," Anna said, "and now I want to help others like him." She meant it. In the months that followed, Anna founded the Caraway Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to protecting whistleblowers, funding independent investigations, and advocating for transparency across all public systems. It began with a single desk and a handful of volunteers. Within 6 months, it had support from 3 senators and partnerships with 2 major watchdog organizations. Sarah stayed on as advisor and lead researcher. Lana joined quietly, first in the background, then as a public speaker, a woman who had run from the truth once but now stood in it fully. Her words carried power. She spoke at schools, at panels, at hearings. She talked about fear. She talked about courage. She talked about a man who had once asked her for help, and who now helped others through the legacy he left behind. By the first anniversary of the investigation, the Caraway case was taught in 2 journalism courses. A segment on his story aired during a primetime documentary special. His name became synonymous with quiet bravery. Not loud, not violent, just real. And it was that realness, that relentless, ordinary decency, that changed everything. Sarah returned to the terminal one final time. It had changed. The floors were polished, the lighting brighter, and the air carried the echo of restoration rather than decay. But some things remained. The rhythm of motion, the voices bouncing from wall to wall, the sense of thousands of journeys unfolding at once. She walked past locker 319, where it had all begun. A small crowd had gathered nearby, reading the plaque in quiet reverence. Others simply passed by, unaware that beneath their feet lay a piece of history, a wound finally allowed to heal. She found Anna near the information desk, holding a copy of Sarah's book. They hugged without words, the kind of embrace only shared between people who had seen something through to the end. "Ready?" Sarah asked. Anna nodded. They made their way outside, where a quiet rain was beginning to fall, light and cleansing. It blurred the edges of the city and softened the noise. Sarah looked out over the horizon of concrete and headlights, and for a moment everything felt still. "Michael once said silence can be louder than words," Anna said. "I didn't understand it then." "I think we all do now," Sarah replied. The Caraway Foundation had just received national funding. A bill inspired by Michael's case, the Whistleblower Transparency Act, was under review in Congress. Schools were teaching his story. Agencies were auditing their own corridors of power with new urgency, and the voices once buried in bureaucracy were finally being heard. Sarah walked with Anna back toward the parking lot, but stopped just before reaching the crosswalk. She turned around, eyes scanning the terminal's old walls, the windows streaked with rain. Then she saw it. A young man, probably in his 20s, standing near the ticket machines, envelope in hand, phone pressed to his ear. His brow was furrowed, his stance uneasy. He reminded her so much of Michael, it made her chest tighten. But this man wasn't alone. 2 station attendants walked past him. A guard stood nearby. Cameras blinked in every corner, and this time, someone would be watching. Someone would listen. Anna touched Sarah's arm gently. "Let's go." They crossed together, fading into the stream of people and umbrellas. The city continued, unaware of its redemption, yet undeniably shaped by it. And so ends the story of Michael Caraway, a man whose name was almost forgotten, a man who chose to speak when silence was safer. A man who believed that even buried truth can surface, if anyone keeps digging. Before we close, take a moment to reflect on the weight of his choice. Ask yourself, would you have done the same? Would you speak when no one else will? Would you risk everything for a chance at justice? Because stories like Michael's aren't just history, they're warnings, they're reminders, and they're calls to action. If this story moved you, if Michael's courage reminded you of someone you know or even of yourself, please subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep telling the stories that matter, the stories that might otherwise remain locked in the dark. And don't stop here. Click on the video suggested on your screen now. There's more waiting to be uncovered. Another case. Another voice. Another truth in the shadows. Because sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to forget. Thank you for watching.